Hi, I'm Ryan.
Hey, I'm Jess, and you're listening to Your Therapist is Not Okay.
Welcome to part 2 of our Q&A about season 2 with our producer Denise.
Hello, everyone. I am back with part two of the questions about each episode from the season. So, if you missed our part one that came out last week, you can just scroll down and you find it right there. That was about episodes 1 to 8. And today we will be covering episodes 10 to 18. So I will dive right into it. So episode 10 was about oversharing in therapy. So I just want to ask you, have you ever had clients express that they experienced a vulnerability hangover after a session? Because I ask because after my first few sessions at the very beginning of me starting going to therapy, I used to feel like, oh my gosh, I shared too much. I talked too much. She didn't really speak. Why was I doing this? What's going on? Why am I opening up so much of myself to this person? And the funny thing is sometimes right before my sessions, I'll also feel like I don't even know what I'm going to talk about. So it was this weird dance of like, I'm sharing too much right after my session. And then before my sessions, I'll be like, okay, but what am I going to talk about? So I'm curious as to how you help clients navigate that swing of emotions, even if it's not as extreme as mine was, in terms of feeling like they're saying too much in therapy.
Mm.
In the early days, I don't think I even thought about it as a therapist, but now I'm really cognizant of it. Usually, I find being able to name it as such.
Okay.
So it's not uncommon for me to pay attention to the clock. There may be a question I don't want to ask at the um like 7 minute mark before we're ending. It might actually be the kind of thing where we start to wrap up and think about our feelings. And depending on how deep we went, actually, sometimes I'll even allow us to slowly but surely pop back up to the surface.
Mm.
So, to kind of talk about this was a really deep and important session. Where are we sitting right now? How are we feeling?
Yeah.
Tomorrow might feel a little scary. I actually will say that, Denise, and ask the client, how are you sitting with that? What can we do for the last 10 that'll
Mm.
allow us to feel really safe when we leave
Mhm.
session? And sometimes it's actually going right out of therapy mode. With each client that is going to be sharing a lot, I generally will create something with them that's pretty tailored to just us and our dynamic.
Okay.
So with some clients that also have pets, that might be their safe topic. Where they'll
Yeah.
say like, "What's Maggie doing with the fireworks?" or something like that, and then I will completely share and equalize that playing field that I'm not above you. And then they might share something. It allows us to kind of drift back out of the depths we were in to
Yeah.
create a level of safety and holding that then maybe the next day there might be some whiplash, but we've dealt with enough in that last 10.
Okay.
So for me, I find I'm pretty aware if we're going somewhere really deep. And then it's my job, I always find, to make sure to hold it so that they don't have your experience.
Mm.
I can't control someone else's experience, but I can do
Mm.
enough to try to hold it.
Yeah. Yeah. Good point.
I will say for me, especially if a client, through our work together has come to realize, or I've come to realize that like they tend to have that kind of vulnerability whiplash, they tend to feel kind of overexposed, that I might work with them about what are your before and after therapy rituals.
Mm.
How do you kind of like put a cap on this after we're done? And some of that can happen in session, and some of that is like, is it best for you if you immediately go,
Mm.
to a important work meeting right after therapy? Maybe not. And for other people, maybe that doesn't phase them whatsoever. But just kind of really being intentional about like, do you take a walk after therapy? That kind of thing.
Yeah.
That can help mitigate some of that.
Okay. Um, I feel like that's very helpful because I didn't quite know how to deal with those emotions of oversharing. And it felt like maybe
Yeah.
I was doing therapy wrong, you know? It felt like, oh, if I go in not knowing what I'm going to say, and then if I leave feeling like I said too much, I think I'm just doing all of this wrong. And I think the problem was that I didn't share this enough with my therapist at the time to be like, hey, I'm really, really struggling with this. But then over time, when I then started seeing a new therapist, I did say, like, yeah, I'm struggling because I feel like I'm opening up so much of myself, especially because you're a stranger. And it's like, why am I sharing so much about myself to a stranger? Like, I
Mm.
mean, I feel exposed. It was such a weird time because at the same time, if you ask me, oh, would you rather share with someone close to you? I'd have said, absolutely not. Why would I do that? Am I crazy? So it was
Mhm.
such a weird thing to navigate. But over time, over time, I did get better at it to be like, ah, no, it's part of the work. It's part of the work because this is uncharted territory for me. And then before we move to the next episode, I also want to say we had a comment where someone said that some therapists are not as comfortable in talking about some of the topics that you guys said you are comfortable with talking about in session, which shout out to that listener. I love seeing you in our comments and I love engaging with you. You're amazing. Thank you so much for all your support. So I want to ask you guys, how do you advise clients and therapists in these types of situations? The situations being situations where the client, let's say, wants to talk about a topic that they're not sure that the therapist would be okay with them talking about. Topics like these are the ones we mentioned in the episode, at least body fluids, sex, or whatever other topics that society at large may find taboo. And then as a therapist, how do you also navigate like the potential of like, oh, clients came up with this and I immediately felt like, oh, this is weird, because you can never really ever mitigate every single thing that people may come up with because clients are all different. You don't know if they're gonna go into detail about this one thing. The other may just passively speak about, oh, this happened the other day. So yeah, how then do we navigate that?
I think so. I think what my response is that like an important caveat that we talked about in that episode is like there's not really an oversharing for Jess and I. That clients can't say too much or share too much. It's up to them what they're comfortable sharing and what they want to work on. So they may feel like that they feel too exposed, like we were talking about with the previous question. Um, but there's not really this TMI thing for me, you know? If you ask maybe certain questions about myself, I may not be comfortable answering, but if it's about the client's experience and the client's stuff, it's kind of all fair game. I do would strongly advise therapists that have whole kind of subject areas that for whatever reason feel like a no-go for them to do a lot of work on that because it's kind of going to be inevitable that stuff comes up. And it's our responsibility as professionals to be able to mitigate our feelings when it does so and communicate with our clients if there's maybe we're not the right fit because we are unable right now or in general to talk about medical trauma or something like that.
Mm,
Mhm.
Those are going to be things that we need to work on because you're right. We never know what's going to come up.
yeah.
I was gonna say that too. When it comes to something we may not be prepared for, I'm kind of with you, Ryan. It's usually the only things that I always have to navigate right on the spot that I can't pass off is personal questions. But if there is something that you feel really uncomfortable working with as a therapist, supervision's an incredible place to bring it to talk about your why and to allow that support. And if it's a topic that you actually don't know much about, let's use addiction or trauma or something that you're actually not trained in.
Hmm.
Recognizing your limits of competency is one of the greatest skills a therapist can have. Now,
Okay.
that's just not saying I'm uncomfortable, but I don't know exactly how to meet my client right where they need.
Hmm.
That is a really awesome thing to recognize. What are my limits? What what might serve the client better
Hmm.
in this instance? But if it's a topic that we're a little scared of and that we're like, we don't know exactly how to ask the right questions because it's something maybe we haven't navigated and it's not about expertise, supervision's your best shout. In Scotland, for example, we have supervisors for our whole careers.
Okay.
In North America, it's not as much, but having some consult group, having someone else that you can lean on is really awesome and important.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really want North Americans to hear that, like, if you want to continue to have routine consultation supervision with a trusted professional, keep doing it.
Mm,
You don't just because you're fully licensed or fully qualified or whatever the terminology in your locale is, it doesn't mean that you can't get the support that you need and want.
Mm.
mhm, 100%. This was actually, I would say, one of my favorite episodes. This
Yeah.
was one of those ones I was completely unprepared for where we were going to go. I thought it was going to stay very surface. And this went really political and really into how we are shamed as society of like what we are and aren't allowed to talk about. So I actually really loved this episode. It might be my favorite from the season.
Oh,
Mm,
interesting. Ryan, which
that's
one's your favorite?
I don't know.
Oh, the politics one. Let me answer that for you.
I do really like the politics one. That's
Yes, I like
absolutely
that one.
true. I really like the homophobia one as well. The
Yes, that was a
internalized
good one.
homophobia discussion.
No,
Yeah.
that was a good one. Yeah.
I'm very bad at picking favorites, Denise. I can't do it.
Oh, because I saw you nodding at just like, and I thought you were immediately gonna be like, yeah, no, the politics one, because no, that one was a really good one, and we reference it all the time. It was
Mhm.
amazing being able to record that and be able to be a safe space for each other because it was just a very heavy time as well when we recorded that. So yeah, on to the next episode, which is episode 11 about men in therapy. How do you approach building trust with male clients who may have a hard time believing therapy is a safe space, especially because some male clients tend to come into therapy having these preconceived notions about, oh, she will expect me to cry, or they'll expect me to cry. It has to look this one way, or whatever, and then be kind of um, averse to therapy for those reasons, but then they're just kind of there because maybe their partner was like, you need to go to therapy or whatever reason. How do you work on building trust with male clients specifically when you sense that resistance? If there are any specific ways that tend to be different from other clients, like non-binary or female clients.
I don't know that I do this in an especially different way with male clients. I mean, I think there are sometimes, different topics that might come up, and also
Yeah.
they're going to be way less different than you actually think. Because I'm
Mhm.
not I'm not a big believer in like a huge differentiation between the sexes. We have very different experiences across different genders too, because mostly the way society treats us
Mhm.
as different,
True.
but at the heart of it being validating and making sure clients know that you believe and hear them, right? I think for both men and women have different experiences of the things that they're often misbelieved about. But
Mm,
I love getting to be the person, regardless of a client's gender identity, that can just believe them right away.
yeah.
And I do like, I make sure people know that their anger, their tears are welcome and that there's also never any pressure to do that, right? Like, I'll talk to some clients that are like, "Oh, I'm really upset, but like, why can't I cry?" I'm like,
Mm.
"You're still upset. You don't have to cry to be upset." And sometimes taking that pressure off it can actually allow them to feel some kind of release, whether the release is crying or just the relief of like, I don't have to have this expectation that my
Yeah.
body does a thing that's outside my control.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm. I was thinking about this question as you were asking it, Denise. And I was thinking about this is one of the things that we were talking about in our podcast, that there's often this assumption that men are going to be more difficult clients
Hmm.
or that they're not going to like therapy
Mm-hmm.
and that they are going to be resistant to therapy. I think there's a lot of tropes about that.
Yeah.
I'm going to be really honest. The male clients that have come into my office that are ready to do the work are ready to do the work. And they're vulnerable and they're going to be with me. And the topics, as Ryan perfectly said, might be different.
Yeah.
Societal expectations were definitely different.
Yeah.
But this understanding that males are just generally resistant to therapy hasn't been something that I've seen
Okay.
nor have had to work with.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Thank you for saying that, Jess.
Yeah, I think it's really important for you to say that because the question that keeps coming up because I'm like, because again of the general societal tropes about, yeah, no men will, you have to like basically pull them into therapy room with them kicking and screaming and you being like their partner or their mom or whatever. So hearing you guys say this definitely does help. And I think also it does point to how the stigma, like what I'm saying very well, contributes to that stigma of like, oh, men don't want to be in therapy and then creates the sort of self-fulfilling prophecy, so to
Yeah.
speak,
Hmm.
in them not wanting to seek therapy because they assume that people are going to be there like, oh, why are you in therapy? When it's like Tony Soprano was in therapy, as Ryan said. I mean, I made them say that, but yeah.
Right. I was gonna say, did I? Have never seen that show, but I do remember you
Denise,
making me say it.
you
Yes.
were the one that was so excited for us to say that.
I mean, listen, I love TV shows, so any reference to any TV show I can make, I love to just throw it in there. But yes, Tony Soprano went to therapy. He wasn't the world's best therapy client, but he still went. That's all that matters. So yeah, it is definitely something that's very important for us to say and to keep reinforcing that idea that they're really not as difficult to work with as we think they are. We being me in this case, I really do need to work on that. But yeah, on to the next episode, episode 12, which is about miracle cures. First of all, shout out to Gina. We loved having you on this episode. Shout out to
Oh,
Monica too.
yeah.
We will have you on a future episode for your own episode. But Gina, thank you so much. We loved your sound bites. My mom even texted me. No, she called me, I think, and she was like, Gina has this the smoothest and most calming voice. And I was like, yes, yes. It was amazing just listening to her sound bites. But yeah, so I have a question for you guys. Is there ever a situation where a client has shown dramatic improvement quickly? And how do you make sure you like help them manage their expectations to not expect that all the time? Because in that episode, we spoke about how usually progress is slower than we expect. So I wonder if on the flip side, if you've experienced dramatic progress and then them like expecting like, ooh, by next week I'm gonna have this big revelation, another big one, and another big one, or whatever.
I talk about at the very beginning of therapy with most clients some kind of expectation setting stuff. I usually talk about how it's going to be a slow process. It's going to be hard. We're not going to end every session feeling good.
Okay.
That I often describe it as kind of a roller coaster,
Mhm.
and I typically say that like the progress won't be linear. Um, but also from that question, like, yeah, I have definitely had moments or sessions or, periods of time where all of a sudden a lot kind of changed for a client.
Hmm.
And I think I often encourage clients to make sure not to choose to end therapy abruptly because
Mm,
progress was made, to feel like, oh, I'm done. In fact, there's a term for it even in
Hmm.
psychodynamic theory called the flight into health. And it usually
mm,
means that there's more depth that needs to be explored.
mm,
And we don't, on some level, want to do that because we've been able to make some surface improvements. But it's fine if clients kind of need to come and go to manage their tolerance for therapy. That's okay. You're welcome to, you have autonomy. That's a very important part of our ethical principles. But I will kind of have that conversation with like, oh, this seems really sudden.
mm-hmm,
Mm.
mm-hmm,
Are you sure? Tell me more about that.
mm,
That flight into health is exactly what my mind went to too, Ryan. Good
Mm,
call. The only thing I would add, because I'm completely with Ryan in that, is talking to clients about the definition of therapy. I find a lot of clients want to bring something bad to therapy. And that makes perfect sense. If we have something we want to work on,
mm-hmm,
then it can be negative. But I like to think of therapy more as like life. Sometimes one of the most meaningful sessions is when we don't have much to bring and we want to celebrate each other. Or we want to celebrate the progress we've made. You want to share how you nailed a job interview. And you don't have to find something negative.
mm,
Sometimes it's those little moments of life that actually, as a psychodynamic therapist, is building trust. Because we realize that you don't always have to have something insanely dramatic or make this wave of progress
yeah.
in order for the work to still be happening.
mm,
And ironically, sometimes we might be working on something for a while and you'll see a TikTok video or you'll see somebody on the street and it'll click into place something that you and I've been working on for a long time. And that's neat and unforeseen, and nothing in the therapy room could have been like that.
Mm,
Just pretend you're working on body image, dysmorphia, and you see this person walk that's maybe a couple sizes bigger than you, holding their body like a queen,
mm-hmm,
and you think, oh, yeah, something that we could talk about for ages, but it might be those small sparks. I've noticed in my office that those things can also add to like amazing changes that I would never foresee coming. So I
Yeah.
think it's a both end with that.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very
Absolutely.
interesting. Yeah.
There's something that in your brilliance you're hitting on there too, Jess, where it's like there's this we can accidentally recreate or kind of reiterate the power dynamic of you're broken and I'm fixed if you're
Mhm.
only allowed to bring broken things or hard things to therapy. Instead, you can also be a successful person. You can also be impressive. You can
Yeah.
also make connections that I would have never made.
Yeah, absolutely. I've noticed, have you ever had this, Ryan, where someone will walk in and be like, I had a really good week. Wait, I'm sure there was something bad that happened.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah.
You don't have to find something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You've mentioned that this season quite a bit. And I'm like, wow. I mean, just enjoy the good weeks. And it makes sense though, because we think of therapy as this place that's supposed to always be dark and dreary and sad and like, oh no, this sucks. So it makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, on to the next episode, episode 13, which is about therapists blaming parents for everything. Um,
Oh, this was a fun one. This
it
was a real
was.
fun one.
It was definitely fun, especially talking about it behind the scenes as well. So I have this question, but before I get into this, I want to say that I've seen a lot of people on social media these days talk about like, yeah, my therapist said this and that. My therapist said you must cut these people off. My therapist said, and I've seen a growing amount of people pushing back in the comments to say that therapists are enabling their clients and shifting blame to some other party instead of taking accountability for the role they had to play in whatever situation. And I'm like, I guess maybe in therapist defense, maybe the issue here is like whatever they said was taken out of context. As Ryan once said in season one, where you're like, I never said that. Um, so the question I have for you in regards to that episode is how do you help clients take accountability without alienating them? Because I know it can be difficult to be like, oh, you had a role to play in these ways in whatever situation we're talking about here. It's not completely down to your parents. You can't say I keep shouting at my partner because my mom was always shouting at me or my dad was always shouting at me. At some point, you have to recognize that you're replaying those cycles, almost not intentionally per se, but then you are perpetuating these cycles. You can put it to a stop, especially as we're doing this work. So how do you hold up the mirror to them without like pointing the finger at them?
You kind of answered the question for me, at least, Denise. That's exactly it. That's what I do. We talk about patterns.
Okay.
We talk about how we might find a partner that can perpetuate this pattern. We found it, and we might subtly manipulate a partner into acting this way, or we found a really good role fit for somebody where we can stay in these patterns. And that's usually the way that we can start to look at the both end,
Okay.
that this may have happened, and here's how I might be repeating this.
Hmm.
Psychoed can be really unshaming in this way
Okay.
by saying that we want to repeat these patterns, usually to fix them, to have some sort of repair. And it's not uncommon for us to find ourselves in these replayings because there's something that's left unresolved.
Mm.
I find that incredibly like life-giving language. It allows for both the responsibility and the understanding of patterns, as you were talking about, Denise, while also showing the why behind it, which usually gives clients, in my opinion, the respect they deserve to know that they can handle like the theory behind it
Mm.
and that we're co-conspirators in therapy together. Let's work on this together.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think when I was first starting out as a therapist, I had some nervousness around this, right? Some of the questions that you're raising of like, oh, is this going to upset them? Or will they feel
Yeah.
like I'm victim blaming?
Yeah.
I really haven't found that, right? I usually phrase things around safety and around like not wanting to be in this situation again. So
Okay.
that it's not that I'm saying, and it's not even that I'm meaning that like, oh, you did this. That's not the case. You didn't do this, but maybe you don't want to experience it again, and we can probably work on ways to avoid those patterns.
Okay, okay. That's very interesting and very important because I had a discussion with my therapist earlier on this year where she was doing exactly that, like holding up a mirror to say, "Hey, we don't want you doing this again. So this is the role you had to play in it." And it was a bit tricky because I was like, why are you attacking me? Like I didn't say that out loud. I didn't say that out loud because in the moment it just came up as some sort of discomfort. And then after the fact, I was like, oh. And then having similar discussions with some other people in my life, it was like, oh, they had the same response as she did. And I was like, oh. Oh, and then at some point it was like, why is everyone blaming me? Like, I am not the wrong party here. Like, over time, I came to realize that, okay, I wasn't seeing it for what it is, which is like I had a really big role to play in this. And she was just trying to hold me accountable. She was just trying to say, hey, this is how we make sure you don't walk down the same path again. I need you to see how dangerous this path was. So next time you
Mm.
see it, you're like, ah, you don't just see it as like, oh, yeah, I mean, there's like maybe like an alligator or two. No, they're sharks and alligators and barbed wire. And like it's much more dangerous than you think it is. So yeah, I think it's very important for us to have that. So thank you guys for your responses. So yeah, on to episode 14, which is about involuntary commitment. So this came up because we got a lot, and we're still getting them. We got a lot of comments with people, especially our younger followers and our younger listeners, commenting about how they're scared of being involuntarily committed by their therapist. And behind the scenes, we were talking about this, and we were like, we were kind of surprised by just how much of a fear this is for people. Like we personally, I knew like, yeah, people are scared of that, but I didn't realize that it was like such a commonly shared fear on this scale. And so we felt like it was a very important episode for us to have. So my question to you in this is, how do you handle a situation where a client's fear of being committed might be affecting their willingness to engage in therapy when they're not necessarily being very forthcoming? And they may not necessarily say, Jess, I think you're going to get me sent to the asylum house or whatever. But you can just kind of tell like, there's a fear here. How do you kind of help them work through those fears without them really being willing to say it as it is, that I'm scared of A, B, C, and D?
When I'm thinking about what I would say to other therapists about this, it's really about like, and what I would say to myself too, making sure the client feels comfortable and knows what to expect so that we've talked about the limits of confidentiality, that I've talked about how rare it is that I do something like that so that they're aware of it, and that I'm not panicking or showing that panic. Something I was actually just talking to a provider yesterday about. We don't do this based on our discomfort. It's
Mm.
based on what the client needs and what's best for the client. Where I've heard people say, like, I'm really nervous. I think I should do this.
Hmm.
It makes sense in this process for nerves to sometimes come up,
Yeah.
but that's not a good reason to break confidentiality and make that kind of decision. So
Hmm.
my advice for therapists is to talk to other people about it, manage your own anxieties. Um, yeah.
That's brilliant. I love that line. It's not about our discomfort, it's about
Yeah.
what's best for our client.
Yeah.
When we were doing this episode, one of the things I was most proud of was being able to be honoring to those who had real experiences
Yes.
and taking that so seriously and not saying that they're inaccurate. Because a lot of our listeners and a lot of the commenters were very specific enough for me to kind of have a sense that this has happened to you.
Yeah.
Being able to recognize that I've definitely had people come in my office who've been hurt by the system.
Oh yeah.
And also, in the same breath, being able to be honoring to those who are in the system that might be overworked and might have seen 100 people in a day. So, that balance, I thought we strove really hard to do that well. And I think when we were done recording, I felt like we had nailed that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But I think that for what Ryan was saying about making sure clients understand that my first point of call is to help you, it's not to commit you, that you're my priority. And how you and I navigate what that looks like is up to us. And then setting those really clear parameters, what we often call the frame, to
Hmm.
keep you safe. Some clients do not tell me to keep me safe. I just wanted to make that one kind of something. There's sometimes clients don't want me to know how sad or how badly they're doing
Hmm.
because we've been making progress and maybe they don't
Yeah.
want to let me down. And so it's not necessarily just about being committed that someone might downplay, but sometimes about the relationship, and being able to then create an even safer space is something that I'll have to do to allow a client to know that no matter where you're at, you get to go there with me,
Yeah.
that you're not letting me down by you being sad. And that sometimes is a replaying of the past
Yeah.
that can come up in therapy.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what we've been speaking about throughout the time we've had this podcast, and I think especially this season, about leveling the playing field through play, through when they ask you questions like the ones you feel comfortable with answering, about your personal life, just kind of like letting them know your personality. It kind of does that work as well of like them feeling safer, like, okay, Jess is not some policewoman who's ready to just send me to solitary confinement if I say I'm sad today and I don't think I want to be here. They see you as a person and not some like authoritative figure who's just ready to send them away at the first sign of like instability or sadness or whatever. So yeah, I think that's very important work that you do here. Thank you.
One thing I love that you just said is really important, that a lot of times your therapist has dealt with things.
Hmm.
Your therapist is not okay was created to allow that leveling of the playing field.
Yeah.
So a lot of times when you're telling me thoughts, they're not thoughts I haven't necessarily had.
Yeah.
So I'm not immediately thinking to pathologize you. I'm thinking, how can I be with empathy in that space with you?
Hmm.
And when we often think of our therapist as this fixer or this authority figure, we sometimes miss that most of the time we've come into this role as therapists because we've gone through stuff ourselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. It's the very premise of this podcast. And I love that. So yeah, on to the next episode 15, which is about self-actualization. So prepping for this episode was just the best. It was the best. Like Jess and Ryan's responses, guys, I wish I recorded their responses to the video with the person who wakes up at 3:50 a.m. It was just the
Oh
best.
yeah.
It was the best.
Saratoga
If you,
Springs, baby.
oh yeah, if you're not levitating for 4 minutes before you jump in the pool, what are you doing with your life?
Like,
Listen.
get it together, girl.
And I love the fact that you guys aren't chronically online in the ways that I am. So you miss these things. So I get to experience them through your eyes for the first time.
I
And
think she's calling us old, right?
yes, yes, yes.
I think she's right, Jess.
That's my nice way of being like, you guys are ancient.
The bar for ancient has gotten very low. I'm in my early mid 30s, as I like to say.
It's old enough. Old enough, okay. It's old
I
enough. But but yeah, it was just just such a nice feeling to be able to connect with you guys in that way, to be like, what is happening here? First of all, that creator, honestly, shout out to him because I think he's doing a very good job of selling his product, which is something about like being able to optimize your day and your life and whatever. He's doing a very good job of at it because he knows how to create videos that get us speaking and that get us to go
Mhm.
on his page and get us to follow him. Because I see a bunch of people in his comments rather, commenting, asking for him to send them whatever digital product he's selling. So it's working. It's really, really working at the end of the day. It's making him money, and that's what he wants at the end of the day. So yeah. And before I move on from that, like my favorite thing was how you guys noticed things that I noticed on the fourth, fifth watch. Like you noticed them on the very first watch. Like, wait, why is he levitating? Wait, why is he on the first page of the journal? Like, did he just buy it today?
Oh yeah, I remember catching that and being like, is this day one of this routine, sir?
I remember going back a couple seconds and being like, is that a banana? Is he wiping his face with a banana?
Yes, I remember when you said that, Ryan. That killed
Enraged.
me. But yes, that creator aside, I have to ask, do you think self-actualization looks different depending on someone's background or lived experience, or do you think it's become a more homogenous thing lately where it's like you have to wake up before 4 a.m. You have to drink a matcha by like 6 a.m. after you're back from the gym. You have to walk your dog by 7 a.m., 8 a.m. You know what I mean? It's become
I
this
do.
homogenous thing.
Yeah, and I think that the marketing and the like faux self-actualization,
Mm.
yes, maybe so it has become this specific thing. But if it's actually self-actualization, it will be unique person to person, right?
Bingo.
Someone that's very self-actualized might get up at 11,
Mm.
right? Someone else might get up at 5, whatever. It's actually about being being the you that you are, not about being this fabricated idea of what perfect is.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The you that you are. Thank
Yeah.
you, Rickon. What you're saying, Ryan, is yeah, that's kind of the definition. I think right now, what's really scaring me is that it's almost always, as you perfectly just said, Denise, to sell something. That this person's talking about his day, but he has people saying, "Can you send me what you're selling?" All of these things that are saying that they'll help us lose weight
Mm-hmm.
perpetuate a body dysmorphic culture, and it's to sell a product.
Yes.
And so I think for myself, it is getting very homogenous based on all these consumerist products that someone's getting paid quite a bit of money to sell, and they're doing it through us thinking that we can fall in line and be the best humans we can be. That's not new. Body dysmorphia has been around for a long time, but when it's done in this kind of aspect of the personal self-actualization, that can be really tricky because we don't know how to parse out that societal expectation
Yeah.
from the person, from the product. And so
Mm.
that is what I think has been really tricky right now as a
Yes.
therapist watching it.
Yeah. No, I think you did a very important thing there in separating those three things, especially the product, because we missed that this person is selling a product just because this person, let's say he really does wake up at that time, like even when he's not filming, he really does wake up at that time. It doesn't mean he lives in this penthouse because he wakes up at that time. It's because of the other things he's doing. That's why he's able to live in a penthouse. It's not because of this product that he's telling you if you do this for 30 days. Because I did see, I'm not sure if it was him or another creator who said that if you do this for 30 days, your life will be changed. This being waking up very ridiculously early. And I'm like, no, it's not that simple. But I think when you are looking for a quick fix because you're just tired of being in the same space, seeing that and seeing a person who looks like they're living a life that you aspire to then makes you feel like, if I just buy this one thing, I'll finally be where I want to be, which is possibly living in a penthouse. But anyway, on to the next episode, the homophobia episode. First of all, this is one of my favorite episodes that we've done this season. Thank you to the listener
Mm.
who sent in the question about
Yes,
this.
thank you.
And it was also nice engaging with them after the fact when they was talking about realizing through this episode that oof, they're actually dealing with more internalized homophobia than they had initially realized. So I just want to ask you, are there tools or frameworks that have helped you or your clients unlearn internalized homophobia in a sustainable way? And I say that because it's tricky when you live in a world which is not really changing sometimes, even especially now, it feels like it's regressing. And it's like the work you're doing in therapy can almost feel like, what exactly is it doing? And I know we spoke about this quite a bit in our last season finales, where I spoke about the work in therapy and the work outside of therapy, where it feels like you're walking back into a world that's not really changing. So it's kind of like, it feels like your efforts are futile in therapy almost.
The sad answer to this is it takes a lot of time to undo those patterns of thought. The amount of times that we've tried to, probably as a child, especially with internalized homophobia, almost tell ourselves that we have to be different or that we have to hide. And those things take a long time. And when we finally do get into a community we might like, navigating again then the societal expectations within that community and how that can also perpetuate our self-hate.
Yeah.
All of that, Denise, can feel takes a long time to find love for yourself when you have a lot of societal and external expectations that tell you how you have to be. There's incredible work that gets done, not overnight, but it's kind of tied into that episode of self-actualization of like, who are you?
Mm-hmm.
What makes you shine?
Mm-hmm.
What can we reject? Those are some of the key things that we do together in therapy over the years that we usually end up working together to
Mm-hmm.
really allow us to shine as an individual.
Yeah. You mentioning community there, and community maybe not always being just like it's over. You still have a new set of kind of things to explore. Um, that's one of the things I would really encourage is like if you find a community, make sure you find a community that you feel good in.
Mm-hmm.
Just going to the gay scene and taking it as it is may not be what's right for you. Maybe you are looking for a subgroup that like shares some other identities with you. You know, we talked about intersectionality some in that episode too. Like
Yeah.
Yeah, we
you're
did.
not everyone's going to feel at home in every single queer space, and especially like gay bars have actually pretty narrow representation for the things that are celebrated sometimes. It depends on the place, depends on the situation. But be really careful in finding something that you feel honored and celebrated by. I would say a tool that I've used a lot myself has been drag.
Okay.
I'm not a drag performer. I don't do drag, but watching it and seeing how they celebrate one another, how they can tell each other truths, they can read each other in a way that allows for laughter and self-understanding is just something that's really beautiful. I do think drag is that avenue for radical rejection of norms that can lead to self-acceptance.
Mm. I think it's very tricky, especially in these political times, to be able to um, feel like you belong. You know, for any
Yeah.
marginalized group outside of just the queer community, for any marginalized group, it's very tricky because it's like, what has all the work we've been doing for the past 20, 30, 50 years? What is the point of it all? Like, what are we doing? You know, it feels like one step back, one step forward, or maybe 10 steps forward and then 100 steps back kind of thing. And it's like,
Yeah.
that back and forth can feel very, very exhausting. So, yeah, I imagine that you're in a very difficult position as therapists in supporting people, especially when you're grappling with this in your personal lives as well. Like, yeah, it's very tricky. So, thank you for all your work on this. It's really
Mhm.
helping a lot of people. I hope you guys realize how much you're helping people, even through the podcast. Like I said, I had a very nice discussion with someone in our comments where they spoke about their own realizations thanks to this episode. So yeah, thank you.
Mm.
It's wonderful.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So my last question for episode 18 is not a question. So we're just gonna have a mini discussion, very, very quick discussion. So my last question is on episode 17, which is about narcissism. So can someone with narcissism truly develop empathy in therapy? And what does that process usually look like? And I know we don't do Jess is here hiding behind her sweater. She's pulled it up and she's hiding behind it. And you know what? I know it's tricky because first of all, we don't do diagnostics here in Canada, at least in Ontario. We don't do diagnoses. But at the same time, I'm just curious about that because I feel like that's a question I walked away from that episode with. Like, is it even really possible? Not necessarily to get to a fixed place, but a place where there is some level of empathy. Because when we see how narcissism is defined in the textbook definition, it seems like that's impossible. So is that
No,
possible or not?
it's definitely possible. It's
Okay.
absolutely possible. That's my resounding answer. You can absolutely develop empathy.
Okay.
Um, and then I think sometimes the work is about connecting the empathy with your actions, right?
Mm,
Because actually, a lot of time, especially if we're talking about like the extreme end that people tend to want to talk about and pathologize of um, sociopaths, as an example, they're
mm.
actually extremely empathic and that they
Oh,
understand how other people function. And
okay.
that's part of how the manipulation can then occur.
Yeah.
What's not occurring, and this is also to the letter of the DSM, is that they don't care about the impact that's having on the other person. Now, this like presentation of sociopaths is incredibly, incredibly rare.
Mm.
And they're
Mm.
not probably going to therapy unless it's for kind of a twisted need anyway.
Hmm.
So the people that I see that fear that they are grappling with narcissism or have been told that they're narcissistic by someone are absolutely capable of developing and demonstrating empathy, and they probably already are in some ways. And there are things about that that are scary for them or hard for them,
Okay.
or that have been thrown back in their face so they do it less than they used to. At the
Mm.
heart of any presentation like that, whether it's narcissism or dependence or borderline, is a history of trauma. There's a
Hmm.
reason that this was developed to protect you.
100%. And it can be really hard to come into our office um, to navigate some of this. Those defenses have probably served for a long time.
Yeah.
And we talked about replaying in an earlier conversation we were just having, um, where sometimes there is a replaying, where we get to be that parent or something else.
Yeah.
Seeking help and being vulnerable is hard no matter what we do, but it can be hard when those behaviors have served us for so long.
Yeah.
But as Ryan perfectly said, being able to link this to who I am, being able to have that self-awareness, being able to recognize that no matter what you're bringing, therapy is not easy
Yeah.
and it's going to take time.
Hmm.
And if you want to do the work, it's there for you. What I don't love is when people pathologize or diagnose somebody as a weapon.
Mm.
And so bringing someone, let's say, a partner to therapy because you think they're a narcissist is not helpful.
Yeah.
If they are suffering with narcissistic personality disorder, that's not something we have to weaponize. It's something that we'll work with seriously in our office.
Okay. Without weaponizing it and making them into this villain.
Right.
It's one of those personality disorders that's very weaponized and very villainized right now.
Yeah.
And it makes sense. It can definitely cause harm to others.
Yeah.
At the same time, it's a personality disorder that is complex, takes a long time to diagnose, and as you said it perfectly, as psychotherapists, we don't diagnose in Ontario. That is a psychologist or psychiatrist to do that. Be that as it may, it is something that being able to work with somebody that can meet you right where you're at can be really important.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so. And I think it's very important for us to hear this because whenever the term narcissist is thrown around, it's always in a negative sense. At least with borderline, I have seen some senses of empathy, people extending some sense of empathy or grace towards people who suffer from borderline personality disorder or some of the other personality disorders like dissociative or whatever. But then with narcissism, there's a very specific type of like vitriol that's targeted at narcissists. I mean, also partly understandably so, right? Where it's like they cause a lot of harm, but at the same time, it's like understanding the root of it, especially when these people seek help in the therapy office. Like there is a possibility of you being helped. In the textbook definitions of narcissism that I've seen, it's always seemed like these people are beyond redemption. Like, and I'm like, okay, so what do we do? Do we just have a subsection of the population that's just damned to hell forever? Like,
Mhm.
what's going on? So is therapy not for them as well? Like, what are we gonna do? So that's partly what also inspired me to ask us to do this question, where it's like, how can we help these people in the therapy room, if that's even possible? Because it seems like it's not. But anyway, to round this off, I just wanted to ask you guys, how are we feeling about this season? I mean, it's been a long one. It's our longest season yet. I know we've only been doing this for 2 seasons for a few months, maybe 8 months now. But yeah, how are we feeling? Where are we at? And what are you excited about for the next season?
Hmm.
I love these Q&As because we've been doing this every single week. When you're like episode 5, I'm like I like have big eyes. I'm like, what did we talk about in episode 5? It was amazing. One of the things that was really cool this season was that a lot of the topics actually didn't come from Ryan nor I. It came from listeners. Where season 1, because we were just launching, it was a lot of our own kind of things we've heard in our office. So that was really cool. And I'm feeling really energized by seeing more and more questions come in, especially from our listeners that we haven't met before in person or otherwise. Like a lot of people are getting engagement from that. So that feels really enlivening. Next season, I'm really, really excited. We were thinking about doing it this season, but then we had other listener questions, so we held back. But bringing on our colleague Monica to talk about psychedelic work and what that looks like, and
Yes.
if it's appropriate for you, and what that might look like, and care in that. That's probably the one I'm really looking forward to the most.
Mm.
But I think what I've noticed, especially in this season, is that anything can come up in season 3. And
Mhm.
that kind of means that there's a bit of an open space with possibility. So,
Yeah.
but that's the one we have planned that I'm really excited about.
Yeah, that sounds, I'm really excited by all the potentiality in season three. And just like in season two, we got questions that we never would have thought of that turned out to be really important to other people that we were like, oh, this is a bigger thing than we realized.
Yeah.
And I also got questions that I was like, oh, yeah, I didn't even think about that. And I love to talk about that. Like when we got
Mm.
the internalized homophobia
Yeah.
question, I was like, that is incredible. I work with that all the time, and I had never thought about it for the podcast. So I was just so glad to get that listener question and be able to do that.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, it's been a really wonderful season. It has been long. Just like, you may have seen some of our posts about taking a week off and doing some self-care, and we have an episode about self-care this season as well. And that is really important. And whatever kind of work you do, we we'd like to be able to give a lot in these episodes, to
Yes.
be vulnerable and open and thoughtful. And so managing our capacity of like how many we do in a row and how frequently we record allows us to be more present for you and create the best episodes we can. So
Yeah.
I'm also excited for us being really intentional with pacing in season three, and we've
Yes.
kind of talked about that.
Yeah, yeah. I'm definitely excited for that too. I think I'm excited for us to get into some of the listener questions we got. Well, it's actually one specifically that we got this season that we weren't able to do. And to our listener who sent this in, we are so sorry it's taken us this long. And that's the episode on decolonizing therapy. We're still working on it. It's absolutely coming. But yeah, I'm excited for us to talk about that because it's such a broad topic. And because we're bringing in a guest to talk about that as well, I'm really excited to see where we're going to go with that. But yeah,
Yeah.
outside of that, for season three, I'm just excited to see the kind of questions we get from other people as well. Because, like you said, it's so interesting when you post something and then you see so much engagement with people sharing the same sentiment over and over and over again. It's like, wow, I did not
Mhm.
know it was this much of a problem for this many people. Because it's one thing to know that it's this much of a problem for a subset of the population. But then when you realize that the subset is much bigger than you realized, it's like, okay, interesting.
Yeah.
Like this is something we definitely should work with. So yeah, I'd love for us to see where that takes us next season. And on top of it all, like honestly, my favorite part is seeing our listeners engaging with us in our DMs. Thank you so much. I cannot thank you guys enough for the DMs that you send us. It's amazing seeing you support us this way. It's amazing seeing you in our comments. It's amazing seeing you liking our posts, liking our stories, even. And please keep it up. Please keep up the engagement. Please keep subscribing. Please keep giving us the 5-star reviews so we keep getting pushed up the algorithms. But yeah, all of this is honestly thanks to you guys because we would have stopped maybe by episode 8 or 9 because we had like 8 episodes pre-recorded before we started. Would have stopped by episode 9 if we had no one interested in this, but because of you, it's still going and it's getting much bigger than we had really prepared for it to be.
Mm.
So yeah, if it's okay, I'm just gonna round this off right here since I never get to do this. It's exciting being on this side of the microphone. But yeah, Ryan and Jess, thank you for letting me bully you into recording every week this season. It's not been easy. There's been a lot of setbacks in terms of falling ill, traveling, and so on and so forth. So thank you for pushing through. I appreciate it so much. And yeah, we will be back with season 3. We will let you know the details on our Instagram. Follow us at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. That's okay with an AY. And yeah, have a great rest of your week whenever you're listening to this. Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, check out our others. And stay tuned for even more episodes coming up.
Follow us and leave a review on Spotify or wherever you listen to your podcasts. And please tell your friends.
You can also follow us on Instagram too at Your Therapist Is Not Okay. Also, if you have any questions that you want us to answer, send us a DM there. We would love to answer your questions. And a lot of our topics come from listeners just like you.